Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's presentation. We're talking about 5 points on why moving from Dynamics GP to Business Central can be hard. For those on the line, you will be on Dynamics GP. If you're not on Dynamics GP, this really isn't for you. We're Endeavour Solutions and our GP Support North team. We're actively supporting over 550 Dynamics GP clients, as well as moving clients and prospects from GP to Business Central. What we want to focus on today is how to move from GP to Business Central and some of the idiosyncrasies on why it can be hard. So I'm Scott Jorgens, and on the line with me is Marvin Burnett, CPA, and been in the industry for, we'll say, more than 10 years. Judging by the haircut and difference in the photos, it might actually be closer to 20.
Actually over 25 now, Scott.
Over 25 now. So a wealth of experience, and thank you, Marvin, for helping us today. What we see on this screen is the Dynamics GP roadmap from Microsoft. This was released back in 2021. It has the fixed life cycle moving to the modern life cycle. All of the updates past 18.1, 18.2, 18.3 move you instantly onto the modern life cycle. This goes to 2028. There will not be a 2029 release for Microsoft Dynamics GP. So that does put pressure on you and your team in making plans to move from Dynamics GP to Business Central. If you do stay on Dynamics GP past 2029, Endeavour and our GP Support North team can still support you. However, that's to our best effort and would not include software updates, security updates, and other Microsoft releases.
Scott, it's a really good point that you made here. I just want to add one thing. So as people are listening to this and hearing, 2028, this is where Microsoft is setting, or a short time after that. We're in 2024 right now, which means we've got 4 years to plan and prep and get that movement happening. So even though it's concerning to hear that Microsoft is setting an end date for GP, we still have a good runway to say, you know what, I need to plan, I need to move. What's that move going to look like? And that's what brings us here today, to help us understand what that migration moving up to cloud and BC will look like.
Fantastic. That's a great segue into our point number 1. So we have 5 points plus a conclusion. So this is a 6-part series. And jumping in, point number 1, just the facts. The facts are Dynamics GP and Business Central are different ERPs. They're both from Microsoft. There is some commonality in terms of the look and feel and integrations with Microsoft, but they are fundamentally different systems. Business Central has a heritage from Dynamics Nav, which was formerly Navision out of Europe, and has been increasing exponentially across North America with Business Central. It has reporting dimensions versus large chart of account strings. The navigation and search are different, posting, approvals, workflow, and the database, especially when we're moving to the cloud. Marvin, anything to add to this?
Yeah, these are some really good points, Scott. So fundamentally, as Scott said, at the core, we're looking at 2 different accounting systems. Now, the positive is they're both Microsoft-based accounting systems. So we're going to be able to leverage a lot of the tools like the Excel, everything along those lines that we're talking about. However, some of the functionality and some of the setup and the configuration is going to be different. So because it is Microsoft has developed a tool, and we'll get into that in a slide or 2, to help us move across. But we do want you to be aware that, there is going to be a shift. There's going to be training required. There's going to be setup and some configuration. But we do have some tools to help us move along that way.
Great. Thanks, Marvin. So point 2 are talking about those tools. There are tools from Microsoft. Endeavour and our GP Support North team also has specialized tools and methodologies, all in an effort to accelerate, reduce the cost, and make the migration easier But these tools only get you part of the way. There is no silver bullet that does a lift and shift. It is very much a migration and moving stuff across. As well, it's worth mentioning a number of clients have implemented Dynamics GP 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ago. Business processes and best practices change over time. This might be a time for additional digital transformation, additional process improvement, plus knowing what are the key functions and features within Business Central. There may be better ways to accomplish your current tasks that will reduce the effort of configuring Business Central, as well as really taking advantage of many of the new tools. Marvin, why don't you talk about some of these tools and how it works?
Yeah, so that's a great point that you're making here, Scott. And to go back, they're both Microsoft-based systems. Microsoft has actually spent a lot of time and effort building a GP to BC migration tool. So what that tool does at a high level is it's going to take master records and some transactional, not some transactional, but transactional history and migrate it across into BC. Now, at its core, so a couple quick points to make. As Scott pointed out, the chart of accounts inside GP is that multi-string chart of accounts. Okay, what does that mean? If I had a department, a division, whatever it is that I'm tracking as additional attributes, I'm going to see a main segment and then a department division. I'm going to see a multi-segment that's pushed together with some dashes. So if I did have a multi-segment chart of accounts. BC has a core account, and then it has a divisional-based structure, which means those multiple segments now become dimensions or attributes that are assigned to a transaction. It is a fantastic way to set things up, I will say, having learned both systems, because the setup going forward in BC is going to be a lot easier. If I have to add a new department, for example, inside the GP world, if there was 50 or 100 GL accounts that was assigned to that new department, I'd have to set up 50 or 100 new GL accounts. With dimensions, you set up one dimension because it's a single attribute that gets pulled together in a transaction. So there are benefits that happen by moving there, but it is important to note that when we are moving, for example, our chart of accounts is going to be switching from that multi-segment to dimensional-based chart of accounts. So the other thing to note is we've got some of the master records, okay? So we've got our customers, we've got our vendors, we've got items and everything. Those are going to get migrated over also. Now, there are a few things that we want to check before we migrate the data over. For example, the item character length inside GP is actually greater than 20 characters. Inside BC, it's 20 characters. So if we have items that are greater than 20 characters, we're going to want to run a few scripts in advance just to make sure that, we're not going to have issues in that migration piece. If there are, we can actually leverage some of those tools that you guys have and own inside GP to fix up and clean up those records. So once we move those over, then we have a nice clean migration path to move from GP to BC. So there is going to be some stuff that we want to take a look at. The other thing that I want to touch on is when we do migrate things over, okay? So the migration tool is going to get us part of the way, not all of the way, because as we noted earlier, these are at its core, two different accounting systems, which means they're going to handle things slightly different. So one of the easy areas also that I can touch on is a little bit of cleanup that we're going to want to do after we get over into BC. Scott, is it okay if I share my screen out for a second? Because I just want to actually pull over some of the information that we're talking about here.
Yes, go ahead.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to share over my screen here. So when I share my screen, let me just pop into this screen here. So a couple things right off the hop. When I pull up BC, so this is Business Central, okay? So from my chart of accounts, for example, when I migrate over my chart of accounts, this is a test company inside Business Central that has a nice clean chart of accounts, and we've leveraged some of the beginning and end totals inside that chart of accounts. GP never had that beginning and end total. It's actually a really nice feature because if I'm looking up for information and I need to know that summary total, like what's sitting in my cash and equivalents, well, I know it's 45,000 here. Inside GP, I'd either have to do a different inquiry that pulled these together or just simple math to pull these together. When I migrate those over from GP to BC, so keep in mind, I don't have totaling accounts in GP. What ends up happening, so this is one of the companies that we migrated over using the migration tool. All of a sudden, you'll see those totaling accounts don't exist. They can be added, okay? So it's not a, oh my gosh, this is the end. I have moved it over and this is the way it is. No, we can still do some of the cleanup. That's easy to do. The other thing that I want to note, just on some of those easy points here is when I migrate over some of my master records. So I've got my customers, right? So when I start looking at my customer card here, I'm just going to drill into my customer. We're pulling over a lot of the information. The credit limits are coming over. I'm actually getting some additional information here. So I'm seeing down in my bottom right corner in my fact pane. So my fact pane is just this fact box that I can open up or closed if I want to see a little bit more space. But I also have these tiles down here which say, you know what, you brought over some GP history because they're sitting inside GP historical tables. So I am getting that information, that history over. So this is a good thing from the standpoint of if I had to look up some of the sales transactions or the receivables transactions, I am getting that information. Now you'll notice the windows do look somewhat different than GP, so don't forget there is going to be a training component in this as well. So you're going to want to make sure the users in your organization know how to navigate and work through the system. So I'm going to move back here again. One of the things I want to touch on, just little things. Inside GP, GP kept the phone number as one big long value. So it was like a 17-character value or something like that because it had the area code, the whatever, the phone number. It actually implied little dashes or little brackets for you just in the formatting. But when it gets pushed over to BC, BC allows you to set the formatting exactly the way you want. So all of a sudden, I'm starting to look at this going, oh my goodness, my phone numbers don't look right. Well, you're right, they don't. I want them cleaned up. But to be able to clean them up, I can easily just edit in Excel. So using this edit in Excel feature, which is very common, this is something that we're using with every client that we migrate over to clean up these records. You can see I'm just going to edit in Excel. When I pop open Excel here, I have the ability to go in. I'm just going to manually do this and apply a couple brackets, okay? I would probably, if I had the time, rather than just doing it for this demo purpose, I would actually format this properly using some Excel that I know. But I'm just going to clean this up. But once I clean this up here, I simply have to go back and say publish. So I would actually apply some formatting all the way through and copy and paste it over. So you don't have to do those brackets. That's some pretty simple Excel stuff. My publish was successful. This is fantastic. When I go back into BC here, so I'm just going to pop open BC, I'm just going to do a quick refresh on this customer page. And you're going to see on this refresh, I've now updated my phone number. So a lot of those formattings, we can actually use a lot of the great tools that are sitting inside BC just to do quick edit in Excel. So
I love that. So often in the past, doing Excel manual manipulation was considered a bad thing. And now it's being encouraged. There's so much embedding where we can copy and paste from Excel, make modifications in Excel, and that instant flow back and forth is fantastic, all with the cloud-based.
God, if you would give me the time, I know you're not going to because we've had this conversation 1,000 times before, I can start going into how if we were in Excel and I wanted to add new records, there's numbering sequences inside BC now. So if I needed to create a new customer or something like that, I can just create that customer inside BC or inside Excel and then publish. And all of a sudden, as soon as I publish, it pushes it right back into GP. So if you think about it, we got a whole new customer list we brought in. We brought in a whole new line of items. I want to set them up quickly. Well, they're probably sitting in Excel anyway, so we can just use that edit in Excel function, set those items up, publish. They're inside of our system. So these tools, even though we're talking about that migration from GP to BC, it takes us part of the way, not all of the way. We've done this before. We know how to get you all of the way, even though the tool takes us only part of the way.
And once you're there, you do have that much more productivity for users. And Microsoft's still doing biannual and quarterly updates, biannual releases with updates all the time in the cloud that are creating new feature functions that make the system run faster, make jobs easier for end users, and now even embedding AI and Copilot.
Yep.
Are we ready for point 3?
Yes, I'll pass the screen back over to you, Scott.
I will take it. Here we go. So point 3 is on-premise versus cloud infrastructure. And this again is why moving from GP to Business Central can be hard. On-premise versus cloud infrastructure. The cloud is easier to integrate, but you don't get 100% access to your database. So there's some that really love having that SQL Server on-premise database with full control. Now you're accessing into what we call the Microsoft Dataverse, and they're cloud-based databases. You get APIs, you get access to your tables, but not to the same level. Luckily, the VPN remote desktop is gone, so the access anywhere, anytime around the world is that much easier, and ability to really support that hybrid working model, work from home, work from vacation, and individuals across the country in multiple time zones. And as you saw with the screens that Marvin just had up, you just hit refresh and you can actually have multiple tabs open, which is very convenient to be looking at different companies or different parts within your company database and be able to refresh those tabs independently, even bookmarks. Role-based security is all attached to the Microsoft Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory. And Marvin, I'm going to have you talk about security after the next screen. I did want to take a quick little segue. This is a chart that's inside a white paper that our team created. It is on our website, free to download, don't need a form, just click on the PDF and you can download it, look for the green hexagons. This white paper was called 10 Proof Points for Moving from GP to Business Central. So what we have on this chart, if we look at the columns, the one in the middle is, here is the state of the nation when Dynamics GP was first being implemented, when you most likely implemented GP within your organization. And now we're looking forward to the 2020s and the modern workday. A number of things have changed from a security and formatting perspective. Back then, it was all about keep people out of the office, lock your door. Everything was hardwired into your network. There may be sticky notes with passwords attached to monitors. Everything was a little bit more keep prying eyes away from the potential hackers that were in the basements. Now we move forward because it's in the cloud, anywhere, anytime access. There's greater risks to Trojan horses, to phishing schemes, time of day access. And really, if we look in the bottom corner, it's those criminal threats. They're now highly sophisticated criminal organizations. Some are government backed. They have whole call centers that you see in the movies, and they're trying to lie, cheat, and steal to get access to your data. So we want to make sure that we have a strong security provisions, and Business Central is living in that world, was created in that world, and reimagined from what the on-premise Dynamics Nav was. And Microsoft really has all those great enterprise level, global security level behind the scenes to keep stuff going. So Marvin, let's why don't I put it over to you, have a few comments around security, and then we'll move on to point number 4 out of 5 points on why moving from GP to Business Central can be hard, and we'll finish up with the 6th in conclusion.
All right, so a couple of great things that Scott mentioned there around security and data access. Okay, so if we hit the first point Scott talked about, was how I'm accessing the data. So there's a variety of different ways when you're in GP that you could access data. You could access data through the application. There was a variety of different windows that you could get to it. But there was also the ability that if, depending on how your security was set up, you may have access to the SQL Server and start pulling reports or start pulling data directly from the SQL Server. Well, now that it's cloud, you can't go necessarily directly to the SQL Server. There's going to be some APIs or web services that are going to allow you to see the data and pull the data. So it's going to be more of a read access that you're looking at, but working through the application to get any updates that you're doing. So if you need to update customers and stuff like that. But you also saw that I was able to dump the data into Excel. So there is still tools there. But if we're talking about from a database standpoint, you're not getting directly to the database anymore. That's just the reality of moving to cloud. Now, on that same vein, in regards to getting access to your data, one of the things that you're going to see is when we move into BC, a lot of the stuff that you're looking at is now going to be sitting in lists. Okay, so when I'm looking at my sales, it's my sales list. When I'm looking at my customers, it's my customer list. When I'm looking at all that different information, it's those lists. Scott, is it okay if I take over the screen one more time and I just want to go into some of those lists?
Go for it.
Awesome. So I'm just going to share my screen out. So I've got Business Central here, right? I'm going to go back to that customer list that we talked about a second ago. So for my customer list here, I'm seeing a lot of information, right? If I needed to see more information, BC also gives you the opportunity to personalize this list. Okay, so when I go into the personalization, I can start bringing on fields that maybe aren't there. So if I pick this credit limit, it's going to make a suggestion to say you probably want to put the credit limit here. I can still move it around if I want, but simply enough, I can just hit done here and it's going to add the credit. Oh, sorry, I should have actually applied it. It would add the credit limit. So that would be one way that we could update that. Now, in terms of the search criteria, so this is, data access still, but how can I find my information inside GP out of the box? Remember how it was a left to right search on that master record ID? Well, once again, I'm now in BC. It's cloud-based. It's going to be a little bit easier to search on. So if I wanted to search on any of the values inside this window or any of the values that are associated here, I can just start simply typing part of the word. So if I wanted to go 2 L's, because yellow, right? That's in the middle. If I just hit that, anything with 2 L's in it in sequence are going to show up. So yellow, why did this one show up? Daryl, so 2 L's in Daryl. So very easy, I can do that. So that's going to be on the security side. Now that's going to be on the data access side, right? So navigating, searching, plus how I can get to my access. There's also, if I need to pull it into Excel, you saw the edit in Excel, and I can also start pulling data through either Power BI or different reporting tools. We'll get into some of those reporting tools in a couple minutes. But the next piece is security. So Scott started talking about security there and the way users are going to access it. Well, this is now going to start, once we move to cloud, this moves from a concurrent user. So GP, often you were seeing concurrent users, which means when I bought GP, I had a 10-user license. What does that mean? Well, the moment the 11th person tries to log in, it says, sorry, 10 people are already in, you can't go in. Now, the other thing it meant was if I wanted to have more than one company open, right? So let's say it's Scott, and Scott's a little bit of a resource hog, and he wants to have holding company A, primary production company, and the manufacturing company. He would have used up 3 of those 10 licenses by opening that. Under the new model, with it being a user-based model or a named license, what that's going to do is say, Scott, if you have access to those companies, you're allowed in them. I'm not using up 3 licenses. I'm using Scott's license. Now, from a security standpoint, we've got a little bit of a different change or thought process here as well. Inside GP, we had roles. Now, a role would define what a person had access to. Okay, so think of roles inside GP as your role and what your security pertained. Now, when I go under my settings here inside BC, you'll see I have different roles. Now, inside BC, you'll see there's a number of roles outside of out of the box. I can pick one of those roles. What that's going to do is just change the look and feel of the application for me. So if I'm a business manager, well, what does a business manager care about? Well, a business manager probably cares about some GL accounts, some sales orders, some purchase orders, actually a lot of different stuff. So as I move through this home screen, it's tailoring my home screen to say, if you're a business manager, you probably want to see this. I can also still go down here and start adding things. So that's on the role. So from the GP standpoint, role really aligned with security. From the BC standpoint, think of role more aligning with the look and feel when you log into the
user
system.
experience.
Exactly. Now, that's great. However, your next question is going to be like, oh my gosh, am I just opening the door to these people because I've had roles, but now I, role something different in BC? Well, no, that's where the permission sets come in. A permission set is now going to start looking at like that that role. So a permission set you may want to call it more like a role from the GP world. So the permission sets are what you assign to a user. So from that basis, the permission set's going to say, okay, Scott, your role says you're a business manager, but your permission set says that you are, have access to the GL accounts, you have access to the purchasing, you have access to the sales, whatever those different functionalities are. You can also set under the permission sets whether they're allowed to have access or remove access, or you can start with one of the permission sets and tailor it to your company to say that they have all of this, but I'm taking this away, or they have access to everything, or however you want to define it. So you still have that security. One of the other nice things that I like on the BC side is more of that granular level of security. So inside GP, you had like very basic audit tracking or audit tools. So some of the tables actually track that Scott did this transaction. A lot of the tables didn't. So over the years, I've had a lot of clients ask, how can I see who entered this transaction? It's like, well, I can tell you who posted the transaction, but I can't tell you who entered it because it only tracks who posted it. That's on the GP side. Inside BC, they actually have audit logs, which allow you to say, I'm going to give Scott access to this window. So maybe Scott has the ability to go and create a customer. But I just want to make sure that I'm double checking and seeing what he's doing. So I can actually turn on the change log, and I can say I want to track changes that happen. So if Scott made a change or created a new customer, it would say who the customer is. If Scott changed it, it would say what the change was before, what the change was after. So it's actually tracking and when it was done. So it gives me a lot stronger auditability of what's happening inside the system. So from the standpoint of security, and we're talking about the migration tool here too, so let's not forget about that. When I'm migrating from GP to BC, the users at its core were SQL users inside GP. They're now named users, so it's like that Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. I think you had the new name for it, Scott.
Entra ID, yes.
Entra ID, thank you. So now it's going to be the Entra ID that I assigned. So when you're migrating from GP to BC, remember one of the tasks that you're going to want to do is that user, I'll call it that user cleanup, or that chance to say I need to reassign security, I need to set up security. So that is going to be one of the tasks that is on the, let's call it on the roadmap to make sure you get done before you turn on the system or open it up to everybody.
Yep, and very, very much a a base level security that makes sense. And then for our project teams, typically train the customer side's admin to say, here's how you can optimize it. You can tinker with it over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
I'm not going to say tinker, but we're talking security. But I know what you mean, Scott. Yeah. This is how we can enhance it.
Thank you. Yes, keep me honest. And yeah, role-based security can go all the way down to individual roles. The nice thing as well is it does follow the individual user. So if Scott only has access to the East region within Business Central, when we move to reporting tools, the data only shows East region. There's not like you don't have to worry about multiple different security.
The other thing I should have mentioned, which you just actually triggered me to remember, is remember those fields that we had? So if I went back into sales and customers here, and I did that, let's quickly do that edit in Excel. This is single sign-on, which means that when I push it into Excel, it's validating that Marvin Burnett, not SQL user Marvin like the GP world, has access to do this. It's actually validating that Marvin Burnett is the user. If I have access here, it's going to let me push it in. And then if I try to edit, maybe I'm doing an update to change the names or update the salesperson code or something. If I'm not allowed to do that, it's going to adhere my security inside that Excel. So if I try to publish it back, it's not going to let me do that.
Yeah, and same with the personalization. When you added in, I want to see the credit, that can be at the individual level. So they're not messing everyone else's screen. They're just changing, personalizing their own screen. Now, behind the scenes, we can, by, all business managers can see a certain layout. Everyone else can roll out and control and push stuff out to multiple users. But the individual experience can also be optimized. So if someone's doing data entry, they're like, I only want to see these 3 screens. They can be watching their data.
Exactly. So, and that's a great point, Scott. You can set on a company basis that says people are not allowed to, I want everyone to see the same layout. So you can secure that down so people can't personalize their screens. Although from our experience, you start finding that because personalization goes to that individual user, it's going to give them that better user experience, and it's going to empower them to, do more with what they have the capability of doing.
Yeah, lots of fun change management and training when our team knows both. Here's how you used to do it in GP, and here's the new functions in Business Central, and how to get that mental leap between one to the other.
Yeah, and that's a great point again, Scott, that you made. It's important to have that knowledge on both sides, because let's make the assumption that if I'm moving from GP to BC, I want to be in the cloud. I want, like, the new features. I want the new functionality. But at the same time, I had a lot of great stuff that I liked in GP. Well, we're here to help transition you to say, that great stuff that you liked in GP, let's make sure it migrated over. And if it didn't, we'll get it set up for you.
Great. Thanks very much, Marvin. Okay, let's move on to point number 4.
Okay, I'm going to give you the screen again.
Thank you. So point number 4, there's a number of new reporting options that you have with Business Central. There's a variety of ways to access your financial data. And at the end of the day, having an ERP is about the controls and access to analytics. And the better the analytics, the better the decisions that your business users and finance community can be making. So you want to jump
Scott.
in on it?
No, you finish off, and you
Okay.
I always got something to add.
Yes. I'm just looking at time. I think we're looking good. The new reporting options, really require thought. Again, a little quick freebie. We have an OKR cheat sheet on our website. OKR is Objectives and Key Results, which is a new fancy version of KPIs, Key Performance Indicators. It's looking at the measures, calculations, consistency, actions. Really, do you trust the numbers, and are you going to do something with them? Are they meaningful to the users? There are built-in dashboards within Business Central. We can also do custom dashboards. There's Smart List versus Business Central Analyze mode, which I'm sure Marvin's going to be able to show us. And with Dynamics GP, you had Management Reporter, or FRX. Management Reporter is gone away. You do not get to use Management Reporter. You have the ability for a number of built-in financial reports, as well as there's third-party tools that are worth looking at. There's a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3. Tier 1s obviously are a little bit more expensive. They have more automation, especially around budgeting, forecasting, scenario planning, and can result in a faster month-end close because many of those calculations are embedded within those third-party FP&A, financial planning analysis tools. If we look at the tier 3s, they also have, great cloud reporting, dashboards, analytics, saving reports, sharing reports, as well as getting reports to non-ERP users. And then there's a number of individual third-party reporting tools that are in between, sort of at tier 2. It might have the right price point and right feature and functions. Marvin, why don't you take over from here? And do you want to just jump into sharing your screen, or you want
I'm
to
going to
talk
share
to
my
some
screen.
of these points?
I'm going to share my screen because it might be, I'm always a visual person, so pictures worth 1,000 words. And like everybody knows, I could probably easily come up with 1,000 words, so maybe pictures should be better. So a couple things right off the hop that I'm going to start talking about is the first thing is Smart Lists. Okay, I love Smart Lists. It is one of the best features inside GP. We've had a lot of customers go, is there Smart Lists inside BC? Well, is there something called Smart Lists inside BC? No, there is some third party like PopDocs and stuff like that that can be leveraged. But let's just pull up this screen that I had used a second ago, Scott. The list. Maybe it's in the name. It is a list already. Can we modify this list? Absolutely. We can go into the personalized mode and add those fields that we want to add from that list. If I need to get this out into Excel, how do I get this out into Excel? Well, I can either edit in Excel or open in Excel. So 2 really easy tools, just like Smart List, so I can dump the data into Excel. But maybe I don't want to dump the data into Excel. Maybe I want to start building information from that data. All right, so how can I do that? Well, inside Smart List, I could always just build out the additional columns, but if I wanted to start creating totals and subtotals, I either had to dump it into Excel, which a lot of people did, or I had to buy a tool like maybe Smart List Builder or something like that to start enhancing my Smart Lists. Okay, so I'm going to start with this list here. If I want to start building out a better tool or a better reporting view of this, I can jump into my Analyze mode. Okay, so right off the hop, you're seeing in my Analyze mode, I have different analysis pages that I've created. But from this, you can see, well, you know what? I'm going to want to create this. Well, maybe I just want to clean this up and have my balance here. So maybe I don't want to have my balance, my sum of sales, I'm just going to leave this balance. So we're just seeing the balance total. I can add additional totals because you're seeing I can just drag and drop those fields on here. Or I want to create this into a pivot table. How hard could that be? Not hard at all. I just have to click on pivot table mode here. I don't have much here, so my pivot table is just giving me a total. Well, that's not great, Marvin. I want to have a name here. So if I want to have my rows, all of a sudden now I have a pivot table by rows. If I want to start pulling in information like what are my sales by my different warehouses? Well, we call our warehouses just color-coded here, so green, main, white, whatever. So now I have my sales by location. Maybe I don't want my sales by location. Maybe I want my sales by, I don't know, one of the other fields. So easily enough, I can just start dragging and drop the fields on, or salesperson code or something like that. So now I'm getting sums of customer sales by salesperson code. Or heck, if I want to transpose that and have salesperson by the rows or the groups and the sales in the companies by the columns, easily enough I can do that. So I can just start pulling the different information the way that I want to see it. I can also go into my, my sales list, so all my sales history and everything. So this is just a quick customer list. I could go into my sales history, my inventory history, my GL, my payables, everything history like that, and I can start building out these lists. Now, when I like this, okay, so what do I do here if I want to keep this? I could always recreate it, but I could just rename this and say this is customer sales by salesperson. And then just rename that, and now I have that list here.
So you get to keep it and save it. Can you share it to others?
Absolutely. If I need to share this out to others, I can just copy link, send it over to Scott. Scott clicks on the link, and now he has this as well. So
and
very
again,
easy
back
that
to
I
that user permissions. As long as Scott
Absolutely.
is a named user, the system knows who Scott is.
That's right.
If I'm allowed to see East versus West, then it almost refilters the data.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Now, I want to get back to my list. So now I'm back into what I would consider smart lists, but it's just my list. So everything inside BC is being built off these lists. I can go into my analyzer mode. I can search for anything I want. But if I needed to go back in, because it's like, oh, I want to take a look at that sales by salesperson again, it's right there. In fact, it brings me to it because that was the last one that I clicked on. So that's going to be on the smart list. And I think it's very important because I know every single customer that I've talked to over the last 20, we'll say 25 years, just to give it a nice easy number, over the last 25 years, they all love smart list. So I want to make sure like smart list is still there. It's renamed, it's rebranded, whatever you want to call it, but it is still there. And it's actually more of smart list on steroids. So that's, out of the box is better. If I want to get into Excel, you saw earlier how we can get into Excel. A couple other things that I want to touch on, because there are some core tools that people use inside GP that I just want to say from a bridging standpoint, whether they exist or not. So Smart List doesn't exist, but lists exist. Management Reporter, very big tool that people use all the time. From the standpoint of Management Reporter doesn't exist anymore inside BC. Why doesn't it exist anymore inside BC? Well, plain and simply, Management Reporter was built off Active Directory. BC is not built off Active Directory. You cannot move that over. The core function of the dimensional value set up inside BC are different than that multi-string value inside GP. So just the fundamentals of how it's switched over, we're not looking at Management Reporter. So it isn't there. But financial reports do exist. If I want to go to my homepage, you can see that I can add financial reports here. So if I want to make a quick link to it, I can just type in financial, spelling's not so good here, but I can click on financial reports here and I can just actually bookmark this. Okay, because I'm a finance guy. I love my financial reports. And now I have a link here. I could have also gone to finance, financial reporting here, a couple different ways to get it, or I could just go up to that tell me. But I know that I'm always going to that. So from that standpoint, I'm just going to go click on my financial reports here. Again, similar to Management Reporter, I can build out whatever financials I need. I've seen some really great naming conventions so that they're all sequenced nicely. I can also note here that there are some M reports that come out of the box with the system. The M reports are going to be the core reports that I don't have to create. So based on the way I've structured my chart of accounts and the categories and the subcategories and the groupings that I've set up, it actually creates a balance sheet, an income statement, a cash flow, and a statement of retained earnings for me out of the box. So these are great tools that you can use to get up and running. I often recommend people start with that and then save as, so they've kept the original, but then as they save as, make it, bank income statement, internal income statement, income statement by department, income statement by stakeholders, whatever it is. So you have the different variation. So from the standpoint of moving from GP to BC, those management reporter reports, it's going to be one of those tasks that you need to think about. We need to create the financial reports because the ones that we had before aren't going to be in BC because management reporter does not exist in BC, so it's going to be a task to create them. Now, there are also some fantastic tools. Scott mentioned some of these Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 reporting tools. We've got Vena, that's fantastic. 𝗺𝗺, another fantastic reporting tool. And even on a very easy, simple mode, Jet Reports is there as well. So we've got a couple of really nice tools that we can actually leverage to enhance our reporting package.
Great. Thanks, Marvin. I'm going to take the screen back over. So point 5, the complexity of replacing ISVs, extensions, and integration. Many clients have been working with Dynamics GP and would have third-party products. You may see that on your annual renewal list that you're paying additional software for additional line items. Third-party products are in the place, and this is a really great thing of Microsoft. They've been doing it for years and have continued to do it forward. They say we have a great core system. We may steal some best ideas and really add it to the core, but we want to have that flexibility that is supporting across industry, across the world, large, medium, small, extra large organizations, and ability for these independent software vendors to add on additional functions. Now, when they're adding on additional functions, it can be embedded, which means it's inside the screens, inside the database. It could be outside. So you're using workflows, you're using screens that are outside and really having just sort of that two-way communication. And there's some that sort of have a hybrid of the two, of where is my data and what is the user's experience? Are they using GP or Business Central or the third-party tool? And sometimes there is some subscription licensing implications of, do they need to still be a named user within the Microsoft realm and Microsoft ERP subscription licensing, or just the ISV? So there's a variety of different options. Marvin, why don't you take it from here and provide a little bit more of the technical spin and how we deal with some of these larger ISVs, some that have same to same, where the add-on, they built the same add-on for Business Central, some they don't have the new add-on, and there's even some where they have a new add-on, but you really don't need it because the core function's already in Business Central.
Exactly. When we're talking, I'll go back to one of those first points. These are two different accounting systems, okay? They're two different ERP packages. There is some similarity between them, but there is still some new functionality. So for example, inside BC, there's a jobs module. There was no jobs module in the core of GP. You could always add, the extended pack and maybe get the project module, but it would still be different than what the jobs module was. So when we start looking at the client environment, we're going to dive in. So from the standpoint of Endeavour, we're going to dive in and say, I see you have, here's all the core modules you have turned on. They align with what the core modules in BC, or this is how they align in the core modules in BC. But I also see that you're using product X, Y, and Z, right? So maybe it's an extension to manage projects. It's maybe it was Parasoft or something along those lines. Or maybe it was binary stream for multi-entity management. Well, what we're going to do is we're first going to go take a look at the marketplace, so the Microsoft Marketplace, to make sure that there's an authorized extension available. And if that extension, so for example, binary stream has migrated their multi-entity, we're going to take a look at it and make sure that, is multi-entity still something you require? Yes, it is. Well, we're going to leverage the binary stream multi-entity, and we're going to have that as one of the extensions built into Business Central. Now, from the standpoint of the extension acts like a hook inside Business Central. So when the core Microsoft data or core Microsoft tables are going to stay intact, and when it needs to, work through some of the multi-entity information or multi-entry requirements, it's going to go out to the multi-entity tables, bring it in, push back into the core tables. This gives the ability for Microsoft to have a cloud-based solution that has automatic upgrades. So there's a lot more. If one of the developers were on the call right now, he'd probably have a little chuckle on how simplified I made that explanation. But the good thing is, when you're getting an app off the Microsoft Marketplace, you know that they've gone through the authorization and the validation that Microsoft has approved this. And what it means is that it is approved and it meets the requirements for the auto updates and everything else that Microsoft needs. So if it's a Canadian app, it has both languages, so English and French. So the Canadian language bases that we want to have inside Canada. So if it's available in the Canadian tenant, it's going to meet those requirements. So very important that we take a look at the environment, take a look at any ISVs that you're using, parallel them over to any extensions, and if you still need them, bring them in. But at the same time, we were going to take a look and investigate why you're using it, what it's for, and maybe the core functionality already has it baked into the core 𝗶𝗍 solution. So very important, because this is core functionality that you need to work day to day, and you want to make sure that it doesn't get missed. So all of a sudden you upgrade and it's like, well, how do I do this? Because I used to use multi-entity, and the people are like, oh my, I didn't realize that. And well, you don't want to come across that scenario.
Exactly. When we talk about integration, you touched on it earlier on that there's cloud APIs. Why do we want to integrate? Why is integration better? Like, it seems to be, cloud just because it's easier, we integrate for the sake of it, or what's the business value that you see for clients?
Well, let's actually take a look at the reason why somebody has, because integration really relies on, I have two different systems in place, right? So maybe you have a CRM system. So you're using Dynamics CE, the salespeople are going in there and they're building out quotes and everything along those lines. They want to see, what's the customer balance? What's the inventory status? What's the item quantity balance? What's, different attributes such as that? We can build an integration, as it's called, or leverage some of the APIs that say, here, let's surface this information inside CE. Now, at the same time, if the salesperson is building out a quote, do you want to sit there and say, okay, Mr. Salesperson, you build out a quote and then print it off on a lovely sheet for me like this, and then turn around and hand it to the customer service desk, and they're going to rekey it into 𝗶𝗍 or GP, whatever tool we were looking at? No, you don't want to do that, because every time you have somebody doing that, you're just doubling up the workload. When I double up the workload, it's taking twice as long to do. The person on the customer service desk may have questions, and they're going back to the salesperson, well, did you mean this? Did you do that? Or whatever it was. Then we also have the chance that, if you hand that quote on paper to Marvin, for example, and he's a horrible speller and he's going to pick the wrong item every single time, you may have some disparity between, I was intending to sell X, but it came through as Y when somebody rekeyed it in the system. This is one of the really important things when we start talking about integrations between applications. So why is the integration that we're looking at really important? It's so that we don't have to double up the workload, and it has those different systems talking together. So that's what we're talking about on the integration side. And when we're talking about integration, we can leverage those APIs. So when we were talking inside the GP world, you didn't write directly to tables, or in some cases you did, but it was definitely not recommended and actually wasn't supported by Microsoft. So if it was found that you're writing directly to tables, Microsoft would say, if there was an issue after the upgrade because they've changed some of the table structure or something, they're saying your system's unsupported. So what you want to be doing is you want to be leveraging in the GP world an integration tool, such as Smart Connect or something along those lines. Well, those tools are still available inside the 𝗶𝗍 space, but we have more tools now because it's a modern interface, it's a modern application, leveraging those open APIs so that we can actually make calls and pass data back and forth through, means that those tools are still available, but we don't necessarily have to use those tools.
Great. So, Marvin, can you quickly talk about the copy and paste functions? Like there's smaller systems that we don't actually need an integration. It could just be a copy and paste to a GL.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to use an example here that's probably near and dear to my heart because I'm an accountant by trade, and I used to work in finance. And one of the third parties or a payroll application that I used when I was back in the controller seat was Ceridian. So from the standpoint of Ceridian, what we would end up doing is we'd have our payroll each month or whatever it was, or biweekly payroll. I would take and I would have a journal entry that I would build out in Excel. From a GP standpoint, I would copy and paste that journal entry from Excel to GP. So that functionality was there. So I would be able to just highlight, copy, paste. So that's on the GP side. Inside BC, we have the ability to copy and paste into, I'm going to say, most windows. So one of the clients that we work with, their customers are constantly sending them through purchase orders. So it's their sales orders, the customer purchase order in Excel. They're in the construction industry, or they supply materials for the construction industry. So their purchase order could be 500 lines long. Okay, so the customer's purchase order could be 500 lines long, which becomes your sales order is 500 lines. Well, we could have somebody key that sales order in one line at a time. That would be quite time consuming. And some of these items are, a box of screws, stuff like that. It may not be that high of a margin. So you have somebody working on that. What they were able to do is they were able to go to their customers and say, here's a template for you to use. I know you guys like using Excel. Can you put it into this template? Customer uses the template. They simply start the header. So they go into the sales order, start the header, who it's for, copy, paste right into the sales order. So now they've saved themselves hours of time, like hours of time each day, literally, by doing this. So inside GP, you had that copy and paste function, but it was on the GL. I used the payroll example. Always get it set up what the departments are, copy and paste. That still exists in BC. You can copy and paste into the GL, but now you can also copy and paste into, for example, sales orders, purchase orders, a lot of different functional areas that you were not able to use in GP. So this goes back to the integration. So do I build an integration? Do I leverage an API? There are certain cases that you definitely want to do that, but there may be some things that are so simple and straightforward. It's like, no, I already get it in Excel. Why can't I just copy and paste it? Well, now you can.
Great. Thanks very much for that. So to recap, 5 points on why moving from Dynamics GP to Business Central. Number one, they were different systems. That was just the facts. Number two was,
Number two, that migration tool only gets us part of the way.
Yes. Number three, the on-premise versus cloud, access to data, as well as security discussions. Number four, looking at your reporting, looking at the needs of your end user community. What are some KPIs or OKRs that make sense? What are the reports and custom reports you've done in the past? How will we translate them or rebuild them, or are they even needed? And do we need specialized tools or use the base reporting tools? And obviously the lists that are also smart, just doesn't say smart lists. And then point five, we're talking about all the ISVs and extensions and integration, all the pieces that sort of surround Business Central and are able to help you get even more out of your system. So drum roll, in conclusion, all this together, so this is sort of our point number 6, after looking at the 5 points and moving from GP to Business Central can be hard, it really results in cost, effort, and time. What does that mean? Marvin, why don't you jump in because you are the expert? What is the cost, effort, and time? Why is it hard to move from GP to Business Central? And it's not just a quick, easy button for lift and shift.
Yeah, at that point is probably more prevalent that it's not just a quick, easy button. There are tools there to help you move, but they're not going to get you all the way. So if you just rely on the GP to BC migration tool, you're not going to be happy once you get into GP because maybe the posting groups aren't what you're expecting. Maybe where you had item classes or vendor class or customer classes, those aren't what you were expecting because the concept of class doesn't exist. They're now posting groups or attributes or what have you. So what we want to do is make sure that you have an understanding of when we move from point A to point B, so GP to BC, everything that you're expecting is going to be there and ready for you after you migrate. So it's not just a simple click of the button, move over. There has to be additional setup and additional functionality if you were using the extension, financial reports, stuff like that. You're going to want to make sure that those are in place before you say, let's turn on the go live switch. Even on the simple standpoint of the users and the security, the reporting that we talked about. So as we're going through it, we want to make sure, oh, and one other thing, point number one, they are two different ERPs. Don't forget that, because if you just hand over the system to the person on the customer service desk that's entering orders, they're going to be lost because they don't even know how to get into the sales order window. So training is always an important aspect of any change. So the migration tool will help us get a lot of the data over, but that other functional areas like how do people use the system, you want to make sure that there's going to be some user acceptance testing in place, because what I did before, I want to make sure I can still do again. That is literally user acceptance testing, and making sure that you're scheduling this so you're not just saying, well, this is supposed to happen over a weekend and great, on Friday we're going to start it, on Monday we're going live. That's just not the reality. There's going to be some time, so you want to make sure that you schedule it, schedule it around, a time that is good for you and your organization, and be cognizant of the people that are working in it. And this is why it's so important to make sure that you're working with the right partner. Endeavour's worked with GP, Endeavour's worked with BC. We're going to be that bridging tool that can help you not only get through those initial steps, but get through the training, any user acceptance, scheduling, and making sure that this is a successful migration. Because at the end of the day, it's as important to us as it is to you that it is successful. Like, we've been with our partner companies for such a long time, our employees have been here for such a long time, that it is always important that we do right and everyone's happy and it's been a successful migration.
Yeah, thanks for that, Marvin. Yeah, it's knowing both sides, and the training is the process training, not just system training. It has that context of the why, the how, the implications, all mapped to the client's sort of unique processes. You can't easily use off-the-shelf training to understand, like, some of the fundamentals are there and are consistent across multiple customers, but it really is that personalized approach and helping the user adoption improve that much more, so people can get more out of their systems. So just as a quick wrap up, I want to quick about us for Endeavour. We've been around for 35 years now. Core values are integrity, trust, and accountability. All of our consultants, round up to about 100 staff, really live by that in helping the customers get the most out of their systems. We have the advisory services, obviously the migration implementation efforts across multiple lines of business, and the ongoing optimization and support. Because we have such a strong focus on long-term support, it really does put the pressure on all of our consultants to make sure that we're setting you up for success after your migration, so we can keep you for customers for the long term. And we want to be able to support you on your phase 1, your phase 2, if you are moving out across multiple phases. A little bit about us. As I mentioned, 35 years, over 900 active clients. You can see from the logos, Endeavour is the main company. We also have a purely CRM team and our GP Support North team, focused each on those individual applications. And today, we're talking about GP Support. We can support you long-term. However, come 2028, end of that roadmap, we want to be looking at moving you to Business Central, and I would say sooner rather than later. There's a lot of benefits in terms of user productivity and a lot of new feature functions, and now's the time to consider that process improvement, the process re-engineering, and helping you improve upon all of your other facets. Next steps, those that are current clients, reach out to Trish, Paul, or Jerry. We have a variety of assessments that Marvin and his team can walk you through. in terms of understanding your current state, looking at the future state, and mapping out what a migration effort, time, cost would look like for each of you. Those that are new to Endeavour, Steve, James, and Johnny are fantastic at moving you through those processes, making sure there's a fit between our two organizations, and often still resulting in some of the advisory services to help you understand and create that vision for what the future is going to look like. So at the end of the day, we're here to help make your Microsoft Dynamics business applications work for you. We only do Microsoft. We love Microsoft and are here to support you long-term on whichever application you're looking for. Today's focus was why moving from GP to Business Central can be hard. Marvin, final remarks as we close up today?
I'm just going to thank you, Scott, for giving me the opportunity to take part in this, and very excited about BC. Been working in the dynamic space for so long, and it is definitely an evolution that clients should be looking forward to.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, everyone. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.